did.
So Mike, were you actually born in Barrow? I mean, I know you grew up here, but you were actually born here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what was it like actually growing up here? Is Barrow's one of those boom and bust towns, isn't it? So was it going through a boom phase or a bust phase?
Definitely in the 60s. It was, there was pubs on every corner with a band in, and there were lots and lots of bands and lots of places to play. But sadly, it's just declined locally now. You know, it's a real shame. There's still a lot of good musicians around, but nowhere to play.
This place is great.
It is. Yeah.
So was there
and next door.
Was it touring bands that would come through? Was it off the circuit? Did your bands would come to Liverpool, Manchester, Preston, maybe Langston and go to Scotland, or would you get a few bands coming over this side?
Yeah, we've got a few bands, yeah. In the day, there were bands like The Sweet, and they were big at the time. They played the 99 Club. Tom Jones played. Not them all yet. It was a really good bouncing place, like Liverpool was. It was on a par, but sadly it's gone down the hill now. I think people's priorities now, the older generation still prioritise music when they want to go out, but the younger crowd just, they don't need it anymore. They've got the internet, they've got drinks at home, and
Well, there's more distractions, but there's also more bands. So they're somewhere, aren't they? So it's. I guess things fluctuate in towns as well.
Yeah.
So, but you're a drummer, so when did you start playing drums, or was that your first instrument?
At school. I started playing at school.
And what inspired you to play the drums? Because it's not often the instrument that people choose first, is it? Because there's a lot of stuff to carry around.
That's true, you can't do it at home. There was the first school bands and everything. You were able to play at the cinema, before Saturday morning pictures, before that started. You could play there. That's where a lot of the young bands around here started.
So what would you be then with that? What year would this be? Would this be?
I was about 12 or 13 then.
So what kind of stuff would you be playing?
Just the local pop stuff. I mean, the first band, we concentrated on The Who and Small Faces, things like that.
So you're more the mod end of the culture?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, Keith Means a hell of a drummer to be your first drummer to try and be like when you're 12. Did you get close?
I didn't get close, but I liked the drums.
And would you play a lot around Barrow? Is it just like a weekly thing, playing in the cinema, like you were saying?
Yeah, you played Barrow. As we got older and I moved into different bands and everything, it was we could go up the coast a little bit. We could go to Millen, Whitehaven, Workington. Although they didn't like us up there.
There's a rivalry between the towns.
Yeah, definitely. They wanted to beat us up as soon as. Well, there's not much to do up there, you see, so they just drink and fight. So, yeah, it's pretty much the same, really.
So did you go through all the 60s things then? Because you talked a minute ago about you were like...
I've been playing from, I must have been playing from 62, 63. The Beatles are a huge influence, of course.
Did they play Barrow? Because they played everywhere. They must be the only town they didn't play then.
They played Blackpool.
Played Blackpool 14 times. It was a showbiz town then, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah. Did the Stones play here, bands like that?
Sorry?
Did Rolling Stones play here?
No, the Stones at Morecambe. They played Morecambe.
Oh, the Winter Gardens.
Yeah,
it's great venue. So then you had your hippie phase. I mean, what was it like being a hippie in Barrow in 67?
Oh my God. We were reading about it and hearing it, and I remember my wife and I bought a flower shirt and had a bell hanging off. That was as close as we got.
What was that like? What kind of reaction did you get with that?
Laughter. At least it broke the ice.
Were you literally the only two hippies in town? It was like a little scene, was there not those unlikely...
No, there was, it was very mixed at the time. We used to play... There was a pub on Roe Island called the Roe Island Hotel, imaginatively enough. And they used to have a disco, and a disco in those days was a black light, so it showed all your dandruff up on your shirt. and that was a disco, and yeah, you could do hippie stuff in there, and as the bands were changing, Small Faces and everything were doing Itchy Park and all that stuff. We were trying to cover stuff like that, unsuccessfully. But it was alright, everyone was getting involved in it.
It was purely as a covers band. Did you ever make an attempt to do your own music or try and get record deals? Just because the cover circuit was good then, wasn't it?
I did the cover scene was great. I did later on when I moved to London. Lived down there for 3 years.
So when did you move to London?
71. And John Robb was in the band. The guy that did Missing You. He was the bass player.
Is he from here? He's
from Lancaster.
Yeah. It's quite. Because I was assuming he was American. I didn't realise he was kind of local.
Yeah. I remember meeting him years later. He came to see a Phil Collins show, and he was in the dressing room. And when he left, we were talking just as mates, and when he left, the wardrobe girl said, "How do you know him?" I said, "Oh, I used to be in a band with him, and he had a big hit by this time with Missing You." And she said, "He's an arsehole." I said, "Really?" I said, "None of the agents will go on here."
That's what I like in Lancaster.
Yeah. Once they get a few drinks down.
So you were in a working band in London then, yeah?
Yeah, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to start working in a band like I worked up here, where you do 3 or 4 nights a week. We were lucky if we got 2 a month. It was really, we were starving. It was hard work. But there's a lot of competition down there, as you know.
So that's why you started working for bands instead of playing in bands as well?
Well, it came by accident because when my wife got pregnant, we were in a bedsit and we couldn't afford to get a 1-bedroom flat, which was a requirement at the time. So we came home and I started playing in local bands, and a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine from Ulverston called Jeff Banks, and he was such a funny guy. He was already down there. We'd come home. He'd been down there for years, and he was working with. I think he started with crawlers or street crawler, then hot chocolate. Oh, and then he worked with he worked with Cat Stevens, and he got fired for taking all the rider out and putting a saucer of milk in the dressing room. Anyway, we were back up here at home, and he started working with Genesis, and they were one of my favourite bands at the time. And I said to him, "Now you're talking." And he said, "Oh, the crap." Because he was like a rock and roller. He loved, AC/DC, anything with rock and roll. And he didn't like it at all, but I loved it. And 1977, I think it was, so I've been home a fair bit. Brand X was one of Phil Collins' side projects, and they were doing 2 gigs that day in July. One was in Crystal Palace, and one was in Paris. So Jeff said, "Do you fancy going to Paris? Take the band gear over," because they were hiring in London. So and we got over to do this gig in Paris, Fête de Humanité, and Peter Gabriel was topping the bill. So I was really, I was loving this with Brand X and Peter Gabriel. Anyway, a year later, Genesis were on tour, and they started this big world tour, and the drum tech dropped out, and he said, "Quick, we need somebody, get yourself out of here, and we'll get somebody else later." So I shot out there, I can't remember where I went to, Germany. And
It's not very professional, this, is it? They just think, I need drum tech, get that bloke who's a drummer, let's go do it. I'm sure a lot of people think you need qualifications for these jobs, but the music business, especially down there, is quite ramshackle, isn't it?
It's funny, the whole thing has changed now, hasn't it? You know, it's become a lot more corporate.
Yeah.
But in those days, it was like, yeah, get your mate in, it'd be all right. But I'd got on with Phil while doing Brand 8, so when the tech dropped out, Chester's guy had gone, he'd said, get Kiddo out, so I went out and ended up doing the whole thing. I mean, I thought I was only going to be there for a week, but ended up finishing the 1978 tour. And in 1979, they rented Abbott Studios to record the Duke album, so we went to Stockholm for a month. That was
what would you be doing in the studio? I understand on tour, you'd be setting up the kit, taking it down, make sure nothing breaks, etc. But in the studio, where you just set the kit up and sit around for a month?
Set the kit up, and then we started copying all the CDs that were in the studio. Came up with a load of copies. And a man, yeah, so that's all right.
It was an interesting period with Genesis then as well, because they were kind of going from more prog Genesis. It's kind of weird new wave pop version of it. So
well, Duke wasn't really pop. Duke was okay, but they went to pop after that.
But they were quite good at pop. That was the weird thing. You never think they'd be any good at pop, but
I was just having this conversation with Lynn because I loved them when they were prog. You know, I would have loved to have worked with them when they were prog. But when they started doing all this pop stuff, I thought, you can go anywhere for this. You know, I don't want it from Genesis. It was a funny old time, really.
Yeah, what was it like working? Is it like you know, you're the butler or something, or is it like a team thing? What's it like?
Oh, no, it was lovely in those days. I mean, the guys were very approachable, and they're all they were all public school boys. So their idea of trashing a hotel room was ruffling a few towels and rubbing the soap. There was nothing much like that. It was, and they were friends. You know, Phil, I used to drive Phil around and he was a mate. But it changed later on, you know, as they got bigger and bigger, they got more demanding, and a lot of people left because they didn't like what they'd become. But I stayed with them, and Jeff was so funny, you know, because Tony Smith used to manage Genesis, Michael Mechanics and Tony Banks, the three members. And there was a very funny situation here, because all of them had been successful on their own. Mike was with Michael Mechanics, and Phil was obviously successful on his own. And I was sitting in the catering one night, and one of the crew members, he said, have you heard this one, kiddo? He said, Tony Smith's out walking his dog, this is the manager, and he said, and he kicked a can, and a genie came out. He said, I'll grant you one wish. And he said, well, you know, I'm a wealthy man, I don't need anything really. He said, I'll tell you what, he said, I'd like my dog to win at White City, you know, the dog track. And the genie had a look at it and he went, you're joking? He said, it's only got 3 legs and it's got 1 eye. He said, and he's 50 years old. He said, how's that going to win at White City? He said, nothing else you want? He said, well, I'd like Tony Banks to have a hit album. And the genie said, let's have another look at that dog. It's a shame, really. But Jeff Banks is like the guy that got me into it, because he was from Ulverston. When Phil's first album came out, Face Value, it got a review in the Melody Maker that said, rock and roll's got its own Cabbage Patch Kid. It looks like he's singing with a stocking over his head. And he hated it. He said, I don't mind them knocking the music, but not my appearance. He said, what's all that about? Anyway,
he's a very unlikely pop star.
He is, isn't he?
Yeah. He's a great drummer though, isn't he?
Fantastic.
Yeah. He's not really that known for his drumming, is he, really?
Yeah, a lot of people haven't seen him at his best, you know, with Brand X and a lot of the sessions that he did, you know. But Jeff used to hate rehearsals, so the band, his band, Phil Collins' band, was rehearsing to go out on tour to promote Face Value. And Jeff used to disappear, he'd go around guitar shops and hardware stores and things like this, you know, he loved doing that. And the keyboards went off, and that's Jeff's gig. So me and my mate had to dive underneath all the cabling, find out where it was plugged up and get it going again. So the band started up, and Jeff walked in, and as soon as he walked in, he stopped the rehearsal. He stopped the band, and he started screaming at him. And he was going purple, he was so angry with him, you know, he was saying, I don't pay you to do this, you know, blah, blah, blah. And Jeff just stood there, waited till he stopped, and he said, take that stocking off your head before you shot. He didn't filter, you know, no edit at all.
How long did you work with Genesis for? Was that quite a few years?
22 I worked with them, yeah. But in between, I was quite happy when it was just Genesis. Then I could come home, well they did an album after they'd done a tour, I could come home, play in a band, and then when they were ready to go out again, jump on again. With 3 bands going.
Full time.
Full time, yeah. You know, it was just like home, straight into rehearsals with another one, and then off again. And then I started getting offers from other people, like friends of mine that work with McCartney, called me in to do that. I did a half tour with McCartney.
Which tour was that then?
It was Flowers in the Dirt, and apparently it cancelled about 10 gigs through the tour, you know, for various reasons. And he was doing these makeup shows, he was going to go back and do them. 2 of them were in England and the rest were in Europe. So I did that, got a chance to work with him.
I mean, what was your role there? Were you still...
I was working for the drummer, drum tech. It was after I worked with Plan, I became tour manager, or while I was working with Plan.
So did you work closely with Carter, or is he just one of those people who appears 1 minute before he plays, or... It's got to be a different kind of vibe working with Genesis, I imagine.
It got a new drummer who was working with Blair Cunningham from Pretenders. And it was kind of working him in. It was a funny old time. It was down at his own place, the mill, Hogs Mill in Battle, Sussex. And it was a funny time because the guy himself didn't know whether he'd got the gig, you know, so he was always on edge. And, you know, it was a strange time. But McCartney himself was great. It was just the people around him changed. As soon as he walked into the room, they all changed.
Yeah.
And that was weird, you know, because I've known him all for a long time. Yeah, that was strange.
Was he quite bossy? Because always, when you watch the Beatles stuff, he's quite a stickler for getting it right, which he should be, of course, you know.
Yeah.
Did he not work like that when he's in that period then?
Well, they'd already worked on the tour, so they'd worked all through all that. You know, I was just doing the follow-up bit. But I ended up working with Pab, which was Paul Boothroyd, and he was a guy that I met years later when I worked with AC/DC. He was the sound engineer, so
when AC/DC being the tour manager, was this your tour managing period? Yeah. So what was that like? I mean, on the outside, this is Brian Johnson at AC/DC, I'm guessing here, isn't it? So
Brian is the funniest guy I've ever met in my life.
His TV series is good.
Yeah, he is so funny all the time.
I used to like Geordie, the band he was in before. They were like the Newcastle Slade, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. He speaks quite fondly of them, and still goes up to see him sometimes. His brother Morris still lives in Newcastle, and he's a funny guy as well. But Brian could be a comedian if he wasn't a singer. You know, he was so good.
I mean, the band themselves, it's an interesting band, I think, AC/DC, because they're kind of a showbiz family, really, aren't they? I mean, their older brother was in the Easy Beats, and one of the other was in Grapefruit or Apple.
Yeah.
So they're not a bunch of rockers from the pub, really, are they? I mean, was it like that when you were working with them? Were they...
It was strange. Malcolm and Angus ruled the roost.
Malcolm Mark was always the main guy, wasn't he, I think?
Yeah.
Because the fantastic riff, the one riff they play, which is the greatest riff ever, that's him, isn't it?
Yeah, it was brilliant. They ruled the roost, and they had 2 tour buses, so I was travelling with Malcolm and Angus, and the band, Brian, Cliff, Phil, were with my assistant on the other bus, and they used to make all the plans. You know, we were World HQ on our bus, you know.
So they had a really good vision of where they were going, what they should do.
Yeah, and Brian said, even though he was, he'd been with them longer than Bon was, the previous singer, he'd been with them longer, but he was still treated as a new boy. And he said, I remember, and it wasn't too long before I started working with him in 94. In 90, one of the tour that they were on, I think it was Razor's Edge, you know, you've seen him on stage, Brian wanders around and Angus wanders around. They bumped into each other, and Angus just turned to him and said, get the fuck off my stage.
Something like that?
Yeah. And I thought, what? Not Brian Johnson? And he couldn't believe it either, but he said, you either swallow it or you get kicked.
So it really is the Young family band, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the brother used to produce them anyway, didn't he? So,
yeah.
So that's a really odd dynamic, to be in a group. And as a tour manager, you sometimes have to step in, or you know,
oh God, yeah.
You have to be the shoulder for someone to cry on sometimes. Yeah.
You never step in front of the brothers, because there was one time in Phoenix, somebody threw beer over Angus when he went out on his little stage thing. Somebody threw beer over him, and they got to the dressing room, and he's still fuming, of course, and Malcolm just said, because Malcolm's a recovering alcoholic, and he just said, oh, the guy had probably had a few too many drinks. And he said, yeah, well, you would know about that, wouldn't you? And they started on each other, and Phil, the drummer, tried to separate them, and they both started on him. It was just, it was crazy.
But it wouldn't always be like that, though, would it?
No,
was it? Or was it?
No. Malcolm used to call me, you know, because he was a recovering alcoholic, he used to say, is it all right if I give you a call when I want a drink? And he said, we'll just go for a walk. So we used to do that, and when he did hit it hard. You know, he did the whole minibar. Down to the Campari and Tizer.
Even the smell of it being enough for him.
Awful. Oh God.
So was Robert Plant the first person you tour managed then?
Yeah.
So how did that come about?
Well, he called me in, like I was telling you, he called me in. I met him on the first 2 albums that he did, Principle of Moments and, the other one. There was 2 that Phil played on. Do you remember them, Neil?
Not Big Rock, was it Big Rock or was that?
That was one of the singles, yeah. That was a rip-off.
Well, all music's ripped off, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's only when you notice, isn't it?
He asked me to do. I'd met him on the first tour that I did with him.
So why did he, because you've been a drum tech before, and did he promote, is he promoted or just change the job title to tour manager?
No, he asked me to go on tour with him, and I said, no, I've had enough of loading trucks now. And he said, no, come out. He said, you can be tour manager. And at the time I didn't even know if I could do it, but I learned that it wasn't that difficult. It's not rocket science. It's more psychology, really.
It's a job that has no parameters, really, isn't it? Because again, you sort of, well, really, you're meant to get the band to the gig on time and make sure the gig functions correctly.
Yeah.
But you're doing about 100 other things as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, you do logistics and everything are done beforehand. Before we go anywhere, he planned everything and booked everything. But Plant was, he was an absolutely charming guy. He was a good friend. He used to come up and stay with us. And then he said, next I go to America where the sun shines out of my ass. And I thought, I just laughed at the time, I just laughed it off. But when I got there, he turned into an absolute diva. Oh my God, like Mariah Carey.
Was that because he thought that was the role he had to play, or was that just...
I think, that's where they made the name and that's where they were biggest. And he expected more respect, I think, because when we were doing the tours of English universities, it was just Robert Plant, I was in a planty, good name, that kind of thing. But when Phil turned the same, actually, when Phil became more popular, he became more demanding, but not like Robert.
What way was he more demanding? You had to have specific things exactly right, like the famous Blue Smarty type thing, was it?
No, he would say to me sometimes, am I being petulant? And I would say, yeah, you are. There was one time we were staying in Los Angeles in the Sunset Marquis Hotel, and we had a bungalow away from the hotel, and you walk back down from the bungalow and you've got to pass the gym, and the gym had glass doors on it, and Bruce Springsteen was in there doing weights. And Robert opened the door and said, silly old bastard.
That's more funny than that.
Yeah, that was funny. But there was a time I was telling you, and after one of the tours that I did, Led Zeppelin were getting back together with a view to touring again.
This is after Live Aid.
After Live Aid, they got Tony Thompson in. Robert asked me to come down to look after Tony, and by the time I got down there, it was in Bath, and I had to change trains about 4 times. And by the time I got down there, Tony Thompson had gone on a dodgy drug deal and slid on the ice into this basement flat and snapped a tendon, so he couldn't play. And Robert said, will you play? And it wasn't like they were playing Whole Lot of Love and stuff.
What songs did you play with them?
They were writing.
Oh, okay, just jamming.
It was just totally unknown stuff.
So how they jamming? Would Jimmy Page just have a riff? Is that how they did the music?
Yeah, sometimes he'd have a riff and he just joined in it. And then Robert would say, try that reggae. And I said, yeah, why not try it 7/8? Okay. And anyway, it was bloody awful. And it was the worst band I'd ever played in. Honestly. I played with a lot of local bands and they were great. But they were the worst bloody band.
Because they were sewn together, not tight, or just didn't have the ideas by then?
It was really sloppy, and the ideas were crap. And, for the songs. And Robert said, we turned up for rehearsals the next day, and Robert said, come on, let's bugger off. He said, there's nothing happening here. And I said, all right then. He said, help yourself to a bag of cymbals. Because all these cymbals had been supplied. So I got myself a bag of cymbals. We're just walking out of this village hall, and Plant and Jonesy are walking in. Page and Jonesy. And Robert said, we're leaving the band. Oh, Jesus.
What was their reply to that?
Well, Page said, why? And he said, why? Well, you haven't stopped drinking for a start. I said, I know where that bottle is in the rafters. And he said, and Jonesy, you need to go back to thought modernisation school for 2 years. And I just wanted to get swallowed up. And I couldn't get out. I couldn't get past them. So, anyway, that was my day with Led Zeppelin. But Robert and I remained friends.
So did you carry on working with Robert after that?
Yeah.
So how many years did you work with Rob Plant
for? 4. Yeah, it was. He had 2 different bands. The first one was a Birmingham band with Robbie Blunt on lead guitar, the one that did Big Log. The riff from that was totally lifted from the Turtles' Happy Together.
Oh, I know.
You remember that? It's exactly, it's note for note. Anyway, when we were on tour, he used to go to, you know, like the similar record stores that we've got here, what are they called? The little vinyl shops.
Second-hand cut-out shops.
Yeah, and he'd buy anything by any local band, and he'd buy it all and ship it home, and so he could have a listen and rip it off.
He's actually a massive music fan as well. I mean, which is which you'd expect that bands to be like, I think bands don't really listen to any music, do they? Because he went to my mate's record shop, and my mate hates Led Zeppelin, and he was not going to serve
I didn't. See, that's why I got on with him. Everyone else was a big Led Zeppelin fan, and I wasn't. I was a John Bonham fan, but I hated all the bloody arty-farty, fairy stuff. What they used to do.
What you mean Robert Plant's bits?
If there's a bustle in your hedgerow. Yeah, even he wouldn't do that. Yeah, we're on tour, and the first, it was at Atlantic, 40th anniversary, and it was at Madison Square Garden, and Robert and I went to where did the Beatles stay? New York. My memory's terrible now.
The hotel?
Yeah.
Oh, I know that. Anyway, yeah.
We went there for afternoon tea, and there was a string quartet playing. They wouldn't let him in because he had shorts on. Flowered shorts. So I had to talk my way into that, and got him in anyway. And he wouldn't, he said, I'm not doing Stairway. And he's explained it recently in an interview where he said the lyrics to that were of a time. He said I was a young man, and he'd probably just said they were crap. But it's still a great riff, isn't it? It's a great song.
You hear it too much though, I think.
Yeah, it's the one they're all known for, isn't it?
Yeah. So from working with Phil Collins, is that how you ended up working with Adamants? Because Phil Collins played Adamant, did he, at one point? Or was that just because you were becoming a bit the go-to guy?
Yeah, it became like that. Yeah, like in those days when he was pulled in to do the Adamant album, we were still mates. You know, it was before it became servant and serf. Yeah, it was, and it was the same with Frida. You know, when we got pulled in to do Frida's album with ABBA, she wanted something similar to In the Air Tonight, which he did. It's called Something's Going On. It got a very similar feel with that.
It's one of those sampled drum riffs of all time, isn't it?
It is.
In hip-hop, you use it all the time, don't they?
Yeah, and it was only compression and
Gate. It's good. I know how they got the sound, actually.
yeah, have you done that?
I used to be the producer, he told me how I did it.
Oh, right.
Hugh Patchen.
Hugh Patchen,
Yeah.
They're huge.
Yeah. It's such it's an 80s drum sound, all came from there, wasn't it?
Yeah. Hugh Patchen had just done, when I was down at the farm on after one of the albums, ready to go on tour, Hugh Patchen had just finished the McCartney album, Press and Play. And I said, fancy you getting pulled in to do a Paul McCartney album, and it was the worst album he's ever done.
There's not much he can do about it, so he can just make it sound good, he's a bit stuck in it.
Try and stick with it, yeah, work with it.
It's interesting that you mentioned that thing about going from being the servant to the serf situation, because how does it work? You know, are you friends or are you an employee? It's a bit blurred, isn't it?
Yeah, we were friends. I mean, we used to hang out together and go to pubs and all. Somebody once asked Phil in a pub, somebody that he'd known, it was a local guy, and he'd asked him to buy him a car. And Phil turned to me and he said, how much is a car? I said, what sort of car? A Cortina or a Mercedes?
So part of the role is you're the person in touch with the real world.
Yeah, I was surprised actually that he wasn't really in touch with the real world because, you know, he'd grown up with his mum and gone through, you know, drama school and all that kind of thing. But yeah, but I was really surprised.
I mean, some of them completely airy fairyland. There are some of them actually people you work with still punching the real world, or is it just non-existent till we get to that level?
It's non-existent, really. It's it would pick out funny little things like, oh, that's too expensive. And it's like, what? Bottle of bloody gin. And he's spending millions on something else. But it just seems bizarre sometimes.
So what was it like working with Adam? Did you work with Adam more than just being in the studio with Phil?
No.
Just working in that situation?
Yeah. No, I was just in the setup of it.
Yeah.
But Jeff was telling me he worked it, and he said he was very funny. He said he was totally straight, totally sober, no drugs or drink. But he said the more drunk I got, the funnier he got. Yeah, it was. I'd like to have done that. That was in Stockholm as well. That was at the other place, wasn't it?
Polar Studios.
Polar, yeah. It's gone now.
Yeah. So when did you actually stop doing this? I stopped in
2002. I was working with UB40 at the time. And it was difficult with them because, again, there are two of us, there's 9 of them. Half of them were on coke and the other half were on marijuana, so there was an up bus and a down bus. They called it the down bus was called the Librarians. I can't remember what they called the up bus, but anyway, it was hard work because they would go from playing arenas in England and go to Europe and play clubs. And I remember telling one of them once, that particular night, it was NEC Arena, and Norman, the percussionist who was a mate, he said, how was it tonight then? I said, well, you've made over $1 million tonight. And he said, oh, fantastic. I said, but now we're going to Europe and you're going to lose it all. Because they wouldn't cut down on anything.
Oh, so they took the caterers, the 2 buses,
everything. I mean, well, we were in Australia with Phil Collins once, and they came to one of the gigs in Sydney and we met them all. And they were on a private plane and we were using commercial, and he was much bigger than they were. So it was just the way they used the money, I guess, or misused it. It's a shame.
So they do a whole world tour and break even?
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder where it went.
You can't really say anything, can you? Because I suppose you'd actually be excess as well in the end. Put it all the way down to one person.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be diplomatic about it, obviously, but I did like to try and let them know. But
so why did you stop then? Did you just want to get back to drumming?
No, it was as big as it is, you know, you're doing the same arenas, you're doing the same thing, and it's almost like going around the town and doing the same clubs. And
it actually got boring.
It just got boring. Yeah. I mean, the reason I wanted to go into tour management was I wasn't physically able to do the truckloading and stuff anymore. So I went into tour management, and then that became a bore really, because you've got to deal with all the personalities, and it was a different set of problems, and I just got bored with it.
So who are the best people you worked for?
AC/DC.
Was it, yeah despite the madness, but that was an occasional madness, but was that because they were actually quite good fun to work with? Or?
Oh, it was so much fun. It was so much fun. I mean, I remember on one of my birthdays, I can't remember where we were, but it was somewhere in the States, St. Louis or somewhere, and Cliff sent 2 hookers to my room at the birthday cake. And I said, I'm sorry I had to do that. I said, tell Mr. Williams, thank you very much, we'll go to his room with it. But no, Brian being so funny, it was, it just made it fly, the whole thing used to fly. And him and Cliff, I used to travel in Europe, they used to use just a fast Mercedes and go after the gig to the next city. And Cliff and Brian would be sitting getting drunk in the back, and I'd be sitting next to the driver who's wired out of his tit. Bloody German driver. And we'd get to the next hotel, and fans always used to find out where they were. You know, they always used to do it. I don't know how they did it, but we're pulling up at this hotel in Luxembourg about 3 in the morning, and there's these kids out there, and Brian and Cliff just fell out the back, just like that fan. And there was another place in Germany that we rolled up, it was a brand new hotel, and they had all the staff lined up. It was about 4 in the morning. All the staff lined up in their uniforms, greeting us, and they all had hot towels. And Brian just wiped his hands and face, and it went back black. There you go, my darling. It's so funny.
Who was the worst person to work for?
That's the most difficult plant in the end.
Yeah.
But UB40 were a handful as well. You know, they were hard work. Just because of the differences in the...
Yeah. You had to have 2 different heads on to deal with them.
Yeah. And you didn't know who'd done what and how much. Oh my God. Yeah, that made it hard work. And I think that was their failing in the end. You know, they could have made a ton of money. You know, and I remember Astro was driving around in an Aston Martin, and he couldn't afford his rent. He couldn't afford his mortgage. And I thought, oh God, you've got all your priorities from you guys. But anyway,
I guess if they were sensible, the band wouldn't be as good though, would they? that kind of like madness is what you kind of need. It's not good for them, but it probably makes the music.
Well, this is it, and this is what you've got to kind of factor in. And you think, well, where's it coming from? Is it part of the madness, or, you know, is it going to be the personalities, or... And you've just got to deal with it, really, or get out. You know, it's easy, isn't it?
So have you written much of this down over the years? Have you written these stories down?
No.
I think there's definitely a very good book here. It's true, isn't it? It's like a portal to a world of God.
Thank you very much. I don't miss it at all. It's just I don't miss the drugs or the rock and roll. It's just
I think that's the title of the book's worked out as well.
just a sector miss.
You could definitely get a book. And you can definitely get that.
I started an outline of it, but it was more of a, you know, it was just to get it out, really, to get it out myself. So
I don't think it's a complex story to tell. I would just write it down the way you tell the stories. Sat there, that's how you did that book.
Do you reckon?
Yeah, it's just great, just a load of great anecdotes, do them in order, and that's it. I'll email you, and I'll tell you how to get that. Thanks a lot. If you want to buy a book, I have my books here. Next year we'll have your book there.